Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We've got a lot of things to break down today, starting with Ja Morant's return to the Grizzlies, but some Grizzlies fans would prefer he was not back. We'll get into that in just a moment. But first, Keith, I've been in the middle of a lot of Lakers stuff today, so I wasn't able to switch my background over. So what I did was I wore a green shirt for you to try to balance things out. But as I'm saying this, I'm realizing this is my green shirt that a lot of people were complaining was not green enough. I promise in real life it's greener than this, but with my grayish background, it kind of gets grayed out a little bit. But I'm trying. That's what I'm saying. That's the main point here. I'm trying to balance out the Lakers centric stuff just for you.
We got to get you some Kelly green, the official colors of the Celtics. So I'll get you 1 cent. It can sit at the bottom of your drawer and be brought out maybe once or twice a year, at most, I'm sure. But yeah, man, it's we're in the throes of COVID out absences and COVID call ups and all these things going on. And in between that, we get what should have been good news. Ja
Yeah.
Morant back. Everybody should have been excited. And yet some Memphis Grizzlies fans are yelling at him that the team was better off without him and that he should sit out again.
It's crazy because Ja Morant is one of the brightest young stars in this league. I am so excited for this guy's future. He reminds me a bit of, we've talked about this, almost like a young Steve Francis, maybe a little bit of Allen Iverson mixed in at times. He is absolutely phenomenal. And I don't think there's any way you can look at this Grizzlies team and say, oh, they're realistically better without Ja Morant. I don't think that is the case at all. Now, they did lose to the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is not a good team. And so, of course, there's going to be fan frustration with that. 102-99, they lost, and they had been playing really well without Ja. But I don't think those two things are linked. I don't think Ja being out equals Grizzlies are a better team. I think it just happened to be on this night they lost when Ja came back. And I don't think that's the kind of thing you take out on your franchise star.
No, absolutely not. It's really ridiculous too. When this is a guy, he's in a small market. He seems very happy in
Yeah.
that small market, seems to want to be there, and yet these people are getting all over him and saying things. And I thought it was good for him to kind of come out and call it out. Where he said normally when people say negative things, it fires him up, it gets him ready to
Mm-hmm.
go. And he said this time, hearing it from his own home fans, it hurt. And then after the game, he then proceeded to go to Twitter. At least I don't know if he also is on Instagram or anywhere else, but said, "Hey, I'm going to shut it down for a little while. I'll see
Mm-hmm.
you. Yeah, when I see you. Anybody who needs to get in touch with me knows how." And that's sad. Yeah, we one don't chase players away from your markets. This is really ridiculous. But two, I mean, this guy's your superstar guy. Like he's shown nothing but the signs of making that leap this year. He's been absolutely
Mm-hmm.
terrific, and yet here you are ripping him because you lost a game, to the Thunder. I get it. It's a bad loss, but
Mm-hmm.
every single team has at least one, probably multiple bad losses on their ledger this year. So this is just this is behavior of epic stupidity proportions, and good for Ja Morant for kind of calling out that like, hey, we hear this and like this sucks. I don't want to hear this. It hurts.
No, and it's not like Ja was terrible on the night. 16 points, 6
No,
boards, 8 assists, 2 steals. Did have 4 turnovers, so that's not great there. But still, he put up some decent stats. He was a +2 so on the night, so that means that you were winning more than you were losing, not
yep.
by a ton, but you were winning more than you're losing than when he was on the court. And like you said, big picture, this is your guy. This is your franchise star that you were able to find in the draft. And you can argue maybe he should have been, now looking at things, the number one pick in the draft. He's absolutely incredible. You shouldn't be trying to drive this guy away or making him in any way feel unwelcomed by that fan base. And you mentioned Ja,
Yep.
putting it out there, mentioning how he was feeling, shutting it down on Twitter. I think that's great for him. We saw Kyle Kuzma had to do the same thing with the Lakers. Lakers fans, every time he did anything, people were jumping in his mentions saying, when are you going to get traded? We're going to send you here. We're going to send you there. He finally just stopped. He got off of Twitter for a while, shut it down. In fact, I think he even disabled his account for a bit because the fans became just too much to bear. And I sure hope things don't go that way with Ja, because he really is an incredible young player. And I think in terms of on the court, it is an adjustment. When you take a star level player and you put him into a team, it's an adjustment to get reused to playing with that player. So you'd expect there to be a few speed bumps here and there, maybe a little bit of choppy play as the team now readjusts to Ja being back. But there was a point where we feared Ja might be done for the season.
Yeah.
And yet here he is all the way back. That should be celebrated, and understand that maybe there's some bumps in the road early, but it's still a great thing for this franchise that he's back.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't want to hear the people saying this is, oh, these guys get paid millions of dollars. They should be tougher than this and blah, 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 blah. None of that stuff matters. I mean, if people say hurtful things to you, it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Last I checked, it doesn't check your bank account. But before that, it's one of those things. Now, I'm not saying feel bad for these guys and cry by
No.
any means. That's not it either. But we just don't need to have a bunch of people, screaming and yelling at guys and saying, the awful things that they say. And this is one, you're right. When you buy a ticket, is you can boo, you can cheer, but you don't have the right to just say anything you want to players. And then social media, that's made everybody
Mm-hmm.
but a tough guy. I forget who it was, but it was social media, Twitter and Facebook have made everybody willing to say things they wouldn't say in person, because in person they get you punched in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some truth to that. But yeah, treat Ja Morant well, Memphis, because if you lose him because of things like this, you only have yourselves to blame.
Yeah, I mean, look, NBA history is littered with players who suddenly felt disconnected from their market and then wound up leaving. I mean, look, you go back to the infamous one, Shaq in Orlando, where that newspaper poll went out and he felt slighted, and then he wound up going to the Lakers because of that, or in part because of that. So there's definitely some precedent here where you want to make sure that you treat your star well, because especially a guy like Ja Morant, because he's given everything he can to make this team as good as possible. And overall, this has been a very good season for the Memphis Grizzlies, sitting at 19-13. Now's not the time to drive a wedge between your franchise star and the city.
All right. Well, the next thing we wanted to get into was Christmas Day, one of the kind of tent pole days on the NBA calendar. It's always a fun day. 5 games on from basically noon Eastern all the way well into the night. That's been a change. I think when we were younger guys, I want to say it was probably 2 games. I think there was like a doubleheader, and at some point they added a third game, and then a few years back they added the night games and everything. So it's it's great, especially on the East Coast for me, because we're Christmas lunch family. So we get up, we do gifts, and then we do lunch, and then off we go. So that generally works out pretty good for me, because a lot of times it's the Knicks in that noon game, and that's a good time to kind of pop in and out while you eat, and then you settle in for the rest of the day. But yeah, it's the news today though, little ominous, little bit scary. Shams and Woj kind of each tweeting portions of this. Shams tweeted at first that there's contingencies, and then Woj added a little more color to it. It sounds like what they're saying is not necessarily teams added to the schedule, which that'd be probably too hard to pull off by anybody's account there, but just if games need to be canceled, the 10 teams playing in those 5 games have been warned that they may move games around on the schedule, with the idea of keeping the 2 to about 8 o'clock window full of games, and then the late night game and then the early afternoon games may be sacrificed. So far, no indications that'll happen. It seems like those games are going to go on as scheduled, but those games are going to go on as scheduled. Definitely without some of the key stars that we're hoping to see.
Well, and the NBA, I mean, this is the big day, right, for the NBA. This is, or one of, I should say, their biggest days of the year. There's a lot of people who look at Christmas Day as the start of the NBA season, right? And obviously it's not. We were close to it last year. We were close to that being the start of the NBA season last year, but it's not. But there's still a lot of people. This is where they start to really focus in on the NBA. So they understand how important this day is. So there has to be contingencies. This doesn't mean they're expecting to cancel games, but if they aren't planning, just in case, they're making a giant mistake. You have to have some type of plan in place, just in case you have to go down that path where games are not able to be played, and you can shift things around in order to maximize your viewership. Because again, this is what draws in a lot of the casual fans and then gets them hooked in the NBA for potentially the rest of the season. So very important that they do have this in place. Again, I wouldn't take this as a sign that, oh my gosh, games are going to be canceled, but they have to plan ahead. They have to be prepared just in case.
Yeah, and the NBA is competing with the NFL this year
Yes.
too. There are NFL games on Christmas Day, so that's another thing to factor in here. They want to make sure that they do have games being played in those windows. So, mention some absences. We are not going to attempt to run through all the players and health and safety protocols.
Oh.
We're up around 100 just in this month of December alone.
Hmm.
Many of them in the last couple of weeks. What we will run through though is more signings. So the last one we got yesterday was Nick Stauskas. Last one we got when we recorded,
Yep.
I should say. That one broke shortly before we finished recording. He was the 28th player to get a hardship deal this season. Since then, there have been 12 more signed just yesterday and today, or at least reported on. So let's run through those real quick. Chris Silva and Ray John Tucker to the Minnesota Timberwolves, a couple guys who have been on and off NBA rosters in the last couple years. George King to the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas loading up with players on hardships here as
Hmm.
they added Marquise Chris, Theo Pinson. Now they're going to add George King. Orlando Magic, Tim Frazier, veteran guard. He's been on a whole bunch of different teams. He's going to join the Orlando Magic. They also officially signed Freddie Gillespie, and they have their four other guys. So six players on hardship deals for the Orlando Magic. And guys, I'm just going in order of that these came in, not any order of impact or names, because otherwise this guy would have been at the top of the list. Lance Stephenson, gonna make an NBA return with the Atlanta
Re-guitar.
Hawks.
The three
Yeah, that's
guitar
it.
is
Yeah,
back.
bring him back. And then somebody said too he may, depending on how long he sticks in Atlanta, may make it to a game against LeBron James and the Lakers. Maybe we'll give him a little sweet nothings in his ear
That'd be fun.
again, like he did back in the day. Zylan Cheatham to the Miami Heat
Hmm.
coming up. Another guy who's been on and off rosters. Tremont Waters, former two-way player with the Boston Celtics, is going to join the Toronto Raptors. Ade Murke going to the Sacramento Kings. He was in camp with the Kings and
Hmm.
now was playing in the G League. Malcolm Hill, he's been a guy on the fringes of NBA rosters. He's also going to join the Hawks. Chicago Bulls. Well, let's come back to the Bulls. I'm going to go to somewhere else and then come back to the Bulls.
Yeah.
Jordan Shackle to the Washington Wizards. He's a shooter, one of the G League's best shooters. He'd been with Washington in camp. And then the Bulls adding a couple guys as they've still got players out. Veteran forward, this one just came through.
Just came out.
Ersan Ilyasova.
Yeah.
It's going to join the Bulls. And then one that I know you want to talk about a little
Uh-huh.
bit, Mac McClung of the South Bay Lakers, who was in camp with the Lakers. Thought at one point in time he might get a two-way with the Lakers as well. He is also going to join the Chicago Bulls on a hardship call-up.
So I've had a few questions about this, about Mac McClung, because Lakers fans obviously are going to react because he was South Bay Laker. He was a guy that a lot of fans were excited to see during the Las Vegas Summer League. And obviously, this is not the only Laker that the Chicago Bulls have claimed. I mean, Stanley Johnson was another one that was on the South Bay Lakers that the Chicago Bulls went and got. And then, of course, we can mention, our guy, Alex Caruso. But that's obviously a totally different category. So with this situation, with a guy like say Mac McClung, I think it's important that we remember, because I've seen Lakers fans already that are saying, well, why didn't the Lakers just sign him? Or why? It depends on roster spots. That's something that's important. But also remember, guys that are on G League teams, they're not committed to any particular team. You can be grabbed by any team in the NBA. And the reason for that is because you want these guys. Ultimately, the G League, the goal of it is to develop players to be brought up to the NBA. And so if you have an entire G League squad that is restricted to just the parent club, that limits the number of opportunities for said player to actually get called up and become an NBA player. So from the player's perspective, you want to have the ability to go anywhere. And that's why the G League is set up the way that it is, and why you've got the Chicago Bulls are able to come over to the South Bay Lakers team and grab a player off of there. So I think that first and foremost is important to understand. This isn't the Bulls cheating or anything like that, or anything shady going on. This is set up the way it is, and there's a reason why it's set up this way too.
Yeah, and there's a reason for both the player and team sides why sometimes they don't just call the player right up
Mm-hmm.
to their roster. Sometimes with the team side, it may be you haven't needed a different position. You don't need a point guard
Yeah.
and the guy's a point guard. Maybe you need a big or vice versa or something like that. Also, sometimes with the player side, they look at it and say, I might have a better chance to really, if I show something, stick. with this team. Maybe they have an open roster spot. Maybe they have a player on a non-guarantee. Maybe they have a guy on a two-way who's shaky. We see this. So these guys are free agents. They're free to choose whatever teams they want. I've been talking to people a lot this week, really starting over the weekend and into the beginning part of the week here, just about what are you looking at with agents and those kind of things, and like opportunity. Are they going to go and just be a practice player and a break
Right.
glass in case of emergency guy, or is it going to be they're going to actually get in the game and play and those kind of things? And then also, what's the long term? Do we think there might be a chance at a real call up later with that team, or what does it look like? And then some are proximity. Maybe they're closer to home. Maybe they're closer to somewhere they want to be. Those kind of things. There's a lot of stuff that factors into this. And then from the team side, it's a lot of like, what can this guy do to help us if we need him? And that's the other thing that factors in. So these are not simple decisions. I talked to one agent of a player who has been signed. I don't want to say who it is, but they had 15 teams reach out to them and say, "Hey, we're interested. What do you think about a hardship?" So that's kind of where this is at. These guys can be pretty choosy right now. It's a lot like the undrafted players at the end of the draft, where everybody's angling, "Hey, we want to get you into camp. We want to get you on a two-way, whatever it is." And a lot of these players are like, "Yeah, let me see. Let me pick, the situation I think is best for me." That's what's going on right now.
Well, and it goes the other way too. Doc Rivers mentioned this, I believe it was last night, that he had former players calling him up saying, "Hey, want to sign me on a hardship exception? I'd like to jump back into things." And he made a little joke out of it and everything. But that's not a surprise either. Guys who have been trying to get back in the league are now seeing opportunities, and so they're making calls too. Like, where could I potentially land? Another angle to this. So let's say
Jason Terry. Sorry, Jason Terry doing work with the Grand Rapids Gold. Isaiah Thomas, Lance Stephenson, both getting called up. There was somebody else too who was with them. Who was it? Now I gotta. Oh, Nick Stauskas was with that team. That team also has Mario Chalmers on it right now. So if you're a former NBA vet and you want to get back, get with Jason Terry in the Grand Rapids Gold, the Nuggets affiliate, because apparently they're getting work done to get these guys back in the league.
Hey, Jason Terry says, "I played a million years in the NBA, so other guys can too. Come on back."
Sure.
Veterans. One other thing with this McClung thing, his 10-day contract expires. Let's say that occurs. When that happens, then what? Is he then free to join any? Let's say he doesn't stick with an NBA team. What are his options at that point?
Yeah, so the South Bay Lakers retain his G League rights. So if he re-signs with the G League, and that's an important thing to remember, these players sign with the league itself, and then they are allocated or picked up by the teams versus signing with an individual G League team. But so let's say he returns back to the G League. That is what will happen in 99% of these cases with these players. They'll return back to the G League if that's where they were previously playing prior to this 10-day call-up. He goes back to South Bay, unless for some reason they don't want him and they're like, "All right, we'll work a trade." Let's say the Bulls fall in love with him and the Bulls are like, "Man, we really want him on Windy City, their G League team." Then maybe South Bay and Windy City work a trade where it's, "Hey, we'll send him there. You trade us this guy and off we go." Those happen very regularly, but more likely he'll just return back to South Bay. Every once in a while, what happens with one of these guys, if they don't stick in the NBA, a overseas club sees, "Hey, wow, they looked actually pretty good with the NBA team. We've got room for them," and then they'll offer a deal which is generally more, works better pay. It's more financially viable for the players, that they're going to make more money, and then that turns into the player heading off overseas. But those are one out of every 25, 30 or so. So it's pretty unlikely.
Right. And then just to update the situation that we talked about yesterday at the end of the show, when it was announced that Mason Jones was signing a two-way contract with the Lakers, that came from Shams Charania. We speculated, okay, well, who's getting waived then? It's either Chaundee Brown or Jay Huff. Chaundee Brown just a little bit ago, 1 hour ago now, tweeted, "Welp, ... So perhaps a little ominous there for Chaundee Brown. Perhaps he lost his spot in the two-way.
My guess is that's the Lakers saying Jay Huff is a 7-foot center, and we're just getting Dwight Howard back out of the protocols, and we want to maybe be a little bit protected there. That would just be my guess.
That's another thing we should mention, Keith, is a lot of people are concerned, and rightfully so, about what's going on, everything within health and safety protocols, the number of players who are in it. I saw the number is now over 100 for the month of December that have gone into health and safety protocols. Obviously, that's a lot. I mean, the NBA was preparing for there to be an increase in health and safety protocols players, but I don't know if they had in their minds it was going to be this many players. But we are also starting to see players come out of health and safety protocols. And we talked about DeMar DeRozan yesterday. Now we've got Taylor Horton-Tucker. We've got Dwight Howard today. We've got a number of other players that are starting to come out of health and safety protocols and rejoin their rosters. So when people say, what's the end goal here for the NBA? Well, the hope is that players will start to come out of health and safety protocols, and eventually the number of players exiting the protocols will exceed the number of players going into it. And eventually, hopefully again, we said they're going to revisit the current rules as of January 19th. Hopefully by that point, you have enough players coming out of protocols to where you don't have to be in this emergency situation, sign healthy bodies so you can play these games as of that point, and you can move on from there.
Yeah, the vast majority of players are clearing within the 10-day window, and then it's usually somewhere between 2 and 5 days after that guys need for kind of reconditioning, get themselves back up to shape. Occasionally, if a player was really ill, it might take a few days longer than that. Some guys like DeMar DeRozan are coming out and they're ready to go, and he's ready to hit the ground running. So it really just kind of depends. So generally, if a player gets put in the protocols, it's a minimum of a 10-day absence, barring consecutive negative tests 24 hours apart, or false positive, or whatever the case is there. So what you're looking at is, all right, so now we've got our guys coming out of these, or going into them, rather, let me rephrase, going into the protocols. Generally, most teams are preparing for it to be about a 2-week absence is what they're looking at. So that's kind of why they're looking at these 10 days as, all right, we're probably going to sign the guy. If the guy works out, we'll sign him to a second one, and then off we go, because then by the time our guy is ready to come back, we're ready. We've got a good full roster. And I know there are teams that are looking at this as, hey, if we're going through it now, maybe it's not the worst thing, because maybe we won't go through it later. So we're going to see where this goes. But I mean, we've seen now a couple players get put in it twice this year without it being false positives, and we're still learning and figuring this out. And as there's variants and everything else out there, it all is kind of just a day by day thing that we've got to kind of sort through and figure out.
Absolutely. It's the world we're living in right now, and the NBA has made it clear they're going to do everything they can to just push through and figure out a way to still get things done. Keith, anything else we need to talk about before we wrap up here?
Yeah, that's just kind of interesting. Woj just tweeted, NBA Today host Malika Andrews will interview Adam Silver today at 3 p.m. So that's about a half hour from now when we're recording. So by the time most everyone listens to this, that'll be well since done. But yeah, that's interesting to see. So I know I'll be tuning in. If there's anything groundbreaking, we'll come back to you and talk about it here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure he's going to have a bit to say about everything that's going on right now. All right, everybody. We do appreciate all the support that we've been getting here on the NBA Front Office YouTube channel, as well as many people have been listening to the NBA Front Office podcast version. So please make sure you do subscribe, turn on those notifications. We do appreciate it. Again, this has been a labor of love, and we certainly appreciate all the support that we've been getting here. Make sure you guys are following Keith on Twitter at KeithSmithNBA. Tons of great stuff there. You guys can find me at Trevor_Lane. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.